Hi-ya! Hi-ya! Ya! Oh ho 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 ho. Buddy went kung fu fast as lightning. What did you say about my goldfish? Hoya! You take that back right now. Hoya! It is officially winter time here in southern New Hampshire. We are getting our very first snowstorm of the season. And I got a greenhouse I gotta heat. As cool as free heating sounds with firewood, it actually is the opposite of free because it costs you a lot of time. And time is the most valuable resource. And I spend a lot of it these days just chopping this wood. Oy. But honestly, I would be lying if I told you I didn't kind of enjoy it. I kind of enjoy chopping wood and making fires. Maybe it's something primitive, but it's like, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And like every time I get a nice hot fire going, ooh, it's a good feeling. And honestly, this 4.5 pound maul, this thing does the trick. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we got a whole bucket of firewood here, chopped in the greenhouse, ready to have the snow melt off of it and get ready to burn in our wood stove, which is doing a great job at heating this place. But unfortunately, I can't rely on it alone. Though that's providing a lot of heat, I actually have basically three other supplemental heat sources. We interrupt this program to let you know Goldfish plushies are available on lukesgoldies.com. This is the perfect gift idea for someone you know that loves fish, loves aquariums, loves goldfish. Check them out on lukesgoldies.com. There is a triple bundle pack for a discount. Currently, we got both the diesel heaters. I actually have them set on the lowest setting possible, but they're going. And I also mounted up my infrared propane heater. And I'm honestly loving this thing. Though it would have been nice to heat this place entirely off of wood, and I'll be honest, when I first built the greenhouse, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking like, you know what? I'm gonna heat this place solely off the wood stove, and it's gonna generate a ton of heat, and we'll stay above freezing the whole winter. And then I already doubted myself even before installing the wood stove, so I'm like, you know what? Let me set up a backup diesel heater, and let me actually set that up first so I make sure I have a stable long-term heat source, and then I'll set up the thing. Turns out the wood stove is like more reliable than the diesel heaters. The diesel heaters, maybe I just didn't set them up correctly. It's very easy to get errors on them. I had one of them that just completely failed on me. The other one that kept having problems with the fuel pump. Maybe it was the way in which I situated it. But lately, I've been running the diesel heaters on the lowest setting, and I've been using this infrared propane heater, and I love this, honestly, a lot more than the diesel heaters. I've only been using it, I've only been using the infrared propane heater for about 1 week. It's toasty. It is really, you can actually see how it's dried up the ground around it from where it's shining. I like this thing a lot more for heating up my greenhouse than the diesel heaters. And if I could do it all over again, I would just get 2 of these guys and say forget the diesel altogether. And let me explain why. Fact number 1 that I love about the propane heater that is not really true about the diesel heater is that all of the combustion happens inside, in the air here. And there's actually no exhaust, meaning all of the heat that's generated from the burning of this stays within the building. Now for the diesel heaters, diesel does not burn nearly as efficiently as propane does, especially that unit. It requires an exhaust to route all the carbon monoxide up out of the building. Now, it is said that you should be careful with how much you run a ventless heater because you can increase the CO2 concentration, but honestly, this building is not really airtight and it's flooded with a ton of plants. So if there's honestly any place that you kind of want maybe a slightly higher CO2 elevation, not carbon monoxide, not CO, but CO2, honestly not super bad of a thing to have in a greenhouse with a lot of plants. But I like that all of the combustion happens in here and stays in here. Some people would view that as a downside because, your oxygen levels might drop, but, I'm not sleeping in here. I'm not really worried about that danger. And with how many cracks and gaps there are in the whole greenhouse structure, I'm not really worried about a toxic level of CO2 building up. Now, if this was in your home that's more airtight, that's a different story. You gotta watch out. But anyway, that's what I love about it. All the combustion happens inside, not the same for the diesel heaters. 2, the main method in which this delivers heat into your greenhouse is much better, in my opinion, than the main method the diesel heaters use. The diesel heaters heat up the air and then blow hot air, and that hot air just, heats up the air of the greenhouse. But think about it. Why do you even want warm air in your greenhouse? Well, you want warm air to heat up the objects that are in your greenhouse. But what if I told you could skip the whole air thing altogether and go directly to the objects? The IR like heat on this basically shines that light onto the ground, onto the water, onto the objects, and the objects absorb the heat directly. So the heat you feel in front of this, it's not hot air, it's actually the rays of the infrared heat coming off that are directly heating you up and are directly heating the objects up. So I feel like if you were to have these kind of positioned to shine over the majority of your greenhouse area, you'll be directly heating up your plants, directly heating up your water and your gravel and all the things that are going to retain heat a lot better than something like the air, in which a lot of it already escapes out of the cracks and stuff. Now I will say some of the heat generation does just go to pure air heat. Like above here you can feel hot air rising, but the whole purpose of this is a lot of it turns into IR energy, which shoots down and directly heats up the ground in which it's pointing at. So for example, so you guys can see this well, here's my little thermal camera. Notice how the ground here is really nice and warm. That's because this heater is shining down on it. And then look at the plants over there. Those plants are super nice and warm. And also, this water pipe here, it looks cold. That's because the water of the entire system is constantly passing through this pipe. And it's cooler because of that, but it's constantly heating up as the IR shines on it. So basically, we're getting this heat that's just shining directly onto our system here, which is a lot better. See that? The heat is, that IR is shining all over this area, and it's directly heating up the concrete and the water and the gravel and the plants instead of just heating up the air. Also, one thing I did forget to mention is that this does have a safety feature of a low oxygen shutoff. So if it were to burn through a lot of the oxygen in a space, it would automatically shut off from low oxygen. Though I haven't had that happen, and I have a carbon monoxide alarm right here, which I've had this running, the carbon monoxide alarm has not gone off. So this thing really does burn very cleanly, and it seems to really not drop the oxygen levels enough for the oxygen shutoff to go down. So another thing that I really like about the propane heater versus the diesel heater is that the propane heater uses propane and not sticky, oily, gross diesel. Something I've really come to hate is refilling these diesel containers, because every single time, without question, you're gonna get diesel on your hands, all right? It's inevitable. You spill a little bit, diesel gets all over the place, you get it on your hands, you smell like diesel. I've honestly come to hate working with diesel, because every time you work with it and you fill up a can, you put it here, you get it on your hands. The wonderful thing about propane is when you get propane on your hands, it's a gas. It doesn't make your hands oily, it's a gas. It just whoosh, goes into the atmosphere. And also you might be thinking, where even is the propane tank? Well, the propane, for safety reasons and for another reason, you actually keep outside. So that's another, I guess, that's something that's a little bit safer about these two, is that your main giant fuel source isn't really near the tank, it's outside of the structure. Whereas for the diesel heaters, you can't really do that. I guess you could, but it would just be a lot more difficult. It'd be a lot more difficult to mount it in that way because, yeah, I don't even know. You need electricity to pull the fuel pump, to do this, to do that. There's a lot more points of failure with the diesel heaters, where with this one, it's not even, you don't even need electricity to run the propane heater. It can run on its own. So as I said, another thing I like about the propane heaters is that all the propane tanks stay outside of the structure, which I feel like is just safer, because with the diesel, you kind of have to have it, near the unit for the fuel pump to pull it in. You need no electricity, no nothing. You just have to hook it up to the regulator and line that inside one little tube, and you're good to go. And also, because when the pressure drops in these cans, it gets so cold, you honestly wouldn't even want to keep it inside. Not only is it not safe, but also it would actually cause there to be lower temperatures in your greenhouse, because the can itself absorbs heat when it releases the high pressure. You can see all the ice crystals down here. That's not from the snow, that's from the can itself being cold. because the gas is running right now. But overall, infrared heat, more efficient for a greenhouse setting than direct air heating. Propane, less messy to work with on your hands. Super easy just to exchange a tank out versus having to go and use a funnel and fill that thing up with diesel every time. If you're trying to decide between the diesel heaters and the propane infrared Mr. Heater, this is called the Mr. Heater, 30,000 BTU, I would 10 out of 10 go with the propane heater. I've only been using it for a week, and it's so much less complex and it works so much better. Like, look at this. It's a heater, and you have this gas line going out here. I also did install a blower to kind of help blow it and kind of get the hot gases that rise here to move through a little more efficiently, but this is actually not necessary. All you need it to function really is that gas line. And then if you look over here, this just looks like a nightmare. Super hot exhaust pipe right here. Wires and tubes and fuel pumps and controllers, and you need a AC to DC converter over here. This honestly just looks like a hazardous, complicated system with diesel right next to diesel. I don't even know. Like, this is honestly just a much higher risk system that's a lot more complicated than the IR propane heaters. And then on top of all of that, there's also the fact that per gallon propane costs around here like $2.95, and per gallon the diesel costs me like $3.99. So it's like over a whole dollar more per gallon. Now I know what you're gonna say, but Luke, per gallon of diesel, there's more BTUs, there's more heat in the combustion of a gallon of diesel versus a gallon of propane. Yes, but the diesel heaters do not have as efficient, not nearly as efficient of combustion as the propane heater. So some of those BTUs, those higher levels of BTUs in diesel, are gonna escape through the exhaust pipe. And it has a hot exhaust pipe that, again, is releasing heat. So it's releasing uncombusted materials, which lower the BTU input into here, and it's taking some of the actual combusted heat and releasing it through the exhaust pipe as well. For the propane heater, it burns much, much more efficiently, and all of that combustion is staying within here. So honestly, after you take those deductions, the amount of BTUs produced per gallon is pretty close to the same, with $1 per gallon savings with the propane. Now, I will say the one biggest downside between the propane heater and the diesel heaters is that you can rig up the diesel heaters to run on high for a long time without any intervention. Right now, you know, I can put them on the highest setting, and they can run for roughly 2.5 days before those things run all the way down. And you could install an even larger tank on there. And you can just fill those up with 5-gallon pails. If you wanted the same thing for the propane heater, if you wanted to rig it up to last for a long time, you would need to maybe get a 100-pound propane tank, which in reality is much more than 100 pounds. Like those things filled up are probably 150 or even more pounds. And if you wanted to rig it up to run on high, it's very difficult to lug that propane back and forth. But, you know, if you were not gonna do that, you just wanna use the little 5-gallon cans or 10-gallon cans, I honestly say the propane wins, much less of a headache. Both of them are less of a headache than wood, but at least, you know, they cost you. This doesn't really cost me, it just costs me time. But honestly, I love the wood. Check this thing out, guys. So I just threw a log in there. The log was a little bit wet, but we got some hot coals here. Look at that. Wow, this is really hot. As much labor as it is to chop wood and, you know, get it in here, constantly load it, this I actually enjoy. I like opening this up, throwing some wood in there, seeing it burn, feeling the heat from it. This is obviously the most labor-intensive way to heat a greenhouse, but it's fun. I like it. Now, some of you may watch this video and think, this idiot, how did this chemical engineer design such a janky heating system with diesel heaters, with a propane heater, with a wood heater? And you're kind of right. This definitely is an inefficient, janky, like not well thought out way to heat this place, because for a couple reasons, I didn't really think it out. I just kind of, you know, went with a bunch of different things. I wanted to just try everything out. And two, obviously the best option would be a heat pump, specifically a water heater heat pump, which eventually is my plan. Eventually, I would like to get strong electrical routed out here so I could run a heat pump to basically just continuously heat the water directly. That's the end goal, is to heat the water directly. But I have a couple problems. I have two-ish main problems to wanting to use a heat pump, which is why I'm going to wait till next season to attempt it, is one, you need electricity, and not just like 500-600 watts. Right now, this whole place uses like 600 watts. You're going to need maybe 2,000 watts. You might maybe even need a little more. You're going to need a little more electricity. Now, it will be cheaper in the long run, but the thing is, I just don't have that much access to electricity. Right now, I'm charging up my solar battery with barely any sun, honestly, mostly with an extension cable from my garage. And I cannot run enough electricity to run a heat pump. So if I actually want to legitimately run a heat pump here safely, I'm going to have like a legit buried line of electricity and a sub panel basically set up somewhere to allow for legit, like, you know, maybe 30 amps or 50 amps of electricity to come here. Right now, I have not nearly close to that electricity. I don't have the capability to run that much electricity out of here. So I need to get like a sub panel installed and a whole line trenched to bring that here. That's the main problem. The second problem is I have to find a system in which copper tubing, because a lot of these things use copper tubing, does not directly come in contact with the water, because that can become toxic for the fish, toxic for, you know, even the plants and the bacteria. So I got to figure out the electricity problem. I just need, like, for the amount of electricity I have right now, I probably want 5 times that if I'm going to be using a heat pump to heat this place. And then 2, I need to find a non-copper containing system or heat pump that can safely heat it for the fish. That's not going to kill them. I definitely don't want to do resistance electrical heating. That's the most expensive out of them all and requires even way, way more electricity than those other options. But I think a water heat pump, a heat pump that directly heats water, is the end goal, but I'm not going to do that till next season. For now, I'm just going to tinker around with my little heating toys and hopefully try to keep the water at, you know, above 50 degrees for the whole winter. And that brings me to my last point, is that a lot of people have been asking me, what's even your goal for the winter? You know, if the water is already at 55 degrees, what's even your goal? I thought that's too cold. I thought you can't keep fancy goldfish at that temperature. Well, I always intended for the water temperature to dip during the winter time. I always wanted that. And I actually wanted it to dip to 55. And originally I was thinking that that was the minimum temperature that I was going to get. Now I'm realizing it's probably going to go closer to 50, maybe even high 40s. As long as I don't kill off all my plants, I'm honestly okay with that. I want my plants to survive for the next season. But I do want a cold period. Hopefully, you know, 50 degrees at the minimum. That's my hope. So the fish kind of go into a dormant state, and then in the springtime, the warming of it will trigger them to breed. A lot of people don't realize this, but when you go from dark and cold and low food to warm to bright to lots of food, you trigger the females to breed. And having a natural, you know, light encompassing system that allows light to come in and is very based on the season's temperatures will really help trigger the females to breed. A lot more so than in a basement where, you know, you don't have consistent light schedules like you do outside, and you don't have the warming and cooling of the seasons like you do in a greenhouse environment. So I do want it to be cold. I do want that coldness to last for approximately 2-ish months. It's probably going to last a little longer than that, but I'm just hoping we go through a little cold period, they just kind of gently rest and get primed, and then spring comes around, and then I really heat this place up. You know, the sunlight comes out, I run everything a little hot, maybe start the season early, and get these females spawning. That's the goal. But yeah, guys, that's about all for today. I just wanted to let you guys know that winter is officially here. It's like 30 degrees out, you know, getting down to the teens and 20s at night. Snow has arrived, but we are still able to keep it like right now I think it's like mid 60s in here right now. So it's still very, very nice and warm in here right now. During the night times, it does dip into the high 40s, the air temperature. But because it gets nice and warm during the day, the water temperature evens out, currently right now, at around 55 degrees, which is honestly my goal, to keep it at that, honestly, until February, until late January, February, when things start to warm up. But yeah, I will keep you guys updated. But yeah, again, when it comes between diesel heaters and propane heaters, especially the IR, I would definitely go with the IR propane heater. if you're looking to heat a greenhouse like this. Just so much less of a headache. I just love that thing.